Kicking off some more analysis, the cogs are now back in motion. The action is as violent as ever, and we have been treated to an early look at the Coalition's creation from the origins of Epic and their long-standing Unreal Engine. Gears 4 is still one of the best demos for Unreal Engine 4 itself, but in this fifth release, simply called Gears, as a full title is just so 2016, darling. With both consoles and the PC version open for business, I can start my war early. Now, is this the most impressive Gears to date? Well, let's find out.
What the hell, man?
Hey, we had to get light in that box somehow, didn't we? Hang on, we'll set you down.
Oh, tell me again why you got me out of my perfectly good bed for this?
Alright.
With the full stack on offer, I think it is best to start at the bottom, which is the base Xbox here in the S model. Thanks to a campaign section for Boot Camp, it allows us to see the maximum the engine can push on all formats. As before, this means base Xbox runs it at a capped 30 FPS throughout, which is the same as 4, and like 4, it uses a dynamic resolution to help keep performance high, with most of my counts here hitting 1920 by 1080p, with some minor 900p level counts cropping up, but there is more at play here in the overall engine. Performance here is excellent, with no real stress moments showing any issues here, but this may change in the full game. Now, multiplayer is again a split render mode, reducing effects and IQ all in the name of milliseconds to achieve that hallowed 60 FPS. The biggest sacrifice is a form of checkerboard or stochastic upsampled reconstruction AA that merges with the temporal AA, an element within Unreal Engine 4 itself. Collectively, this is a no-brainer. The previous version of Gears used a dynamic horizontal resolution scaling, which you could see quite obviously, certainly on the post effects, and it kicks in quite often in the game, dropping down to around 1280p levels at certain points on the width. Now, it may be a lower base here, or it's more likely a dynamic one alongside this, but the net result gives us a variety of counts from a full 1080 right down to 1440 by 810, 1536 by 864 and 1280 by 720, which I suspect is the lowest bound here. It may actually be the base resolution itself, but the jittered reconstruction across 2 or more frames with that temporal accumulation quickly resolves every frame back to 1080, even if the image here is rarely rendered natively. If at all, I would say at 1920 by 1080, it's still a better overall image quality than Gears 4 due to that reconstruction element and the dynamic element overall. But you can see some of these breakups in the stochastic sampling. Certainly in the menu screens on the character selection on slow movement, that image can build up over time, and this is noticed as you play and really stare at the sections. But for multiplayer, it's a worthy sacrifice to keep performance. Now, the reduction is obvious, but thanks to the excellent but soft AA, it still looks impressive. It also improves the performance and response, which is a worthwhile goal in these aims and commendable on the now 6-year-old hardware. It also uses an adaptive VSync for the last few milliseconds, which means mild top section tearing can happen infrequently, with performance being solid enough, if not perfect, to not be of any real concern, even in this early tech build. You can look at the other versions here side by side of Gears 4 beta test and obviously the previous Gears Unreal Engine 4 preview, which was the Ultimate Edition of Gears 1. They really performed very well overall at 60 FPS. This is again a title that's pushing more and more visual quality and throughput at that level of performance. It's just ever so slightly below that threshold of a perfect 60, but really I doubt anyone would notice or care. You can still wall bounce, 2-piece Superman and own your enemies aplenty, even here on the Xbox One S, without any worries or qualms whatsoever.
Time to go for a ride.
Out of the way! Uh-oh.
Moving up to the Xbox One X, we see an obvious substantial increase. The first and probably the biggest aside the resolution is the fact that the single player campaign will run at 60 FPS, as proven here. We're in the boot camp section, which is 30 on the Xbox One. It's 60 here again, pretty much locked in these early sections, but don't expect that in the full campaign. And it shows the improvement to the visual quality. Resolution again here is dynamic, scaling from 3200 by 1800 at its highest point, with that reconstruction element pushing it back up to 4K, and then scaling down to somewhere around 1440p is the lowest I've seen. Moving over to the multiplayer, we see a reduction in the IQ and the visual effects to keep that performance high, and again that reconstruction element does give us bigger variations in scaling, and we do see that vary quite a lot, again from a fully native 3840 by 2160, and then right down to various other counts which we see, which can drop as low as 2880 by 1620, and again 3200 by 1800 creeps in. Now we may go lower than that, but this is all I can see, and again those elements are dynamic, and that temporal reconstruction pushes it back up to 4K, even if the native rendering resolution is rarely, I believe, at a fully native 4K, just like the Xbox One is rarely at a native 1080p. It is an impressive image quality overall, and it looks beautiful in action both in multiplayer and single player, and there are extra elements available here on the Xbox One over the base PS4. Yes, PS4 players, you won't be playing this obviously. No, what I meant was Xbox One players. Yes, you don't get screen space reflections. They are present on the Xbox One, they're not present on the Xbox One S. Now, they were present in the beta of the Xbox One Gears 4 version, but they don't appear to be in the multiplayer now. I've played it recently. Maybe they took them out, maybe it's only certain maps, but they're certainly not in there now, and they're certainly not in this version here. They're completely removed, and you just see screen space reflections used in the single player campaign on the Xbox One and again in multiplayer. But the screen space reflections do more than just add that reflection of light, they also add the colour of light, and therefore they make the GI, the global illumination, better in the game, because these metallic surfaces that are prevalent across the entire COG world here are missing, and they're mostly more diffuse on the Xbox One S than they are on the PC and the Xbox One X, due to this additional reflectance that's added over the cube maps, which is sitting on the standard version. You can see an example here between the reflections on both sides of the surface wall on the top, the metallic surfaces, the specular reflection from the screen space is added, and it isn't present on the Xbox One S. Now, I would be amazed if this wasn't added back in for the single player element, but right now it wasn't present in the multiplayer on Gears 4 now, and it isn't present here on this version, so we'll have to wait and see. Aside this, everything else seems to be the standard improvements. Motion blur again is present in the single player campaign and in the boot camp, not in the multiplayer one, for obvious reasons. One, it helps massively on post-process reduction and therefore performance, but also in multiplayer it's a better use of that technique, so it's a cleaner view. When you're spinning the camera around quite a lot, that blurred element would actually intrude on playing the game in multiplayer, so it's very beneficial they have turned it off. But here, going from 30 to 60, it still looks impressive and sumptuous, and it's really clean and very well sampled. It's better sampled on the Xbox One than the S, and again it's even better sampled on the Ultra version on PC, which I'll cover in a moment. Aside this, shadow quality, resolution, shadow cascade look very much the same, aside the increase to the output resolution buffers, obviously improving those. Again, you will see those elements of resolution affecting the image quality overall, and the multiplayer performance is superb as expected. In fact, I encountered no dips other than one small stutter which happened from time to time, and this is likely a net lag or a CPU issue that's just cropping up in this early tech test. Overall, this is a locked 60 FPS with no issues at all on the Xbox One, and very impressive, smooth and enjoyable it is to play. It's obviously a much better image quality playing on a 4K screen, which I've deployed all these versions on a 4K screen. You can really see the difference between the Xbox One S and the Xbox One X here. The image quality and the improvement, which you can see an example off screen, is huge in that increase in image quality and pixel count. But again, you can see that leap overall back to the native 4K version on my RTX 2070. It does look sharper, crisper and cleaner by and large. But again, you wouldn't really notice this or care about this unless you're comparing them side by side. You are paying a lot more money for this kind of PC. You do see substantial benefits over iQOO alone. These stem from per object motion blur is much better velocity based. It tracks more objects on a faster and slower velocity, therefore you get more per object motion blur. Radial camera blur, screen space reflections are improved, the shadow quality and the diffuse, the umbra and penumbra is added, and the AO is better. It actually uses much better HBAO type AO, and it uses a capsule reflection technique, something like a proxy capsule on character models, which reflect objects as they're near metallic surfaces. Now this isn't a screen space solution per se, because you can't see the element in the screen buffer, it's not there in the depth, it's actually reflecting surfaces that are backward cool facing from the camera. So this looks like a proxy capsule method, but it's carrying colour elements as well, so you get reflections and specula off the armour and the lights of your character's models when pressed up against those waist-high walls which are evident in Gears titles. Again, there are more elements in the title we see from the PC version with its benchmark. We see deformable snow when you run through the benchmark section. Again, we saw this way back with the Rise of the Tomb Raider titles. You get an idea of the AI content the single player title will rely on and that destruction element in the title, but again it could most likely be a Houdini type baked solution which we saw in Gears of War 4, but I'm sure those elements will ramp up the quality and the pizzazz of those single player that the Unreal Engine 4 and the Coalition can deliver, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. And the PC version allows us to take a good look at that and just how well it runs. Now moving into the final look of performance, and overall we see that the Xbox One is a lock 60, I've just covered, and the PC version on the ultra settings, yes, it will struggle in the campaign. Certainly you cannot run this particular GPU at ultra settings at 4K. It hovers somewhere around the 40s just in these elements alone, so expect that to get much worse, and then the benchmark is somewhere around the 30s. So it is a very stressful and future-proof engine, and they are pushing forward to what's possible on those GPUs now and in the future. So if you do want a native 4K and a 60 FPS locked title, you are going to have to drop some of those settings down, but I'll cover that in the full PC release once it gets pushed out to all Xbox and PC players.
Now that's good data. Put that in your thing.
For some goddamn reason, DBs have trouble nailing a perfect reload. Show them how it's done.
Oh, perfect. That's gotta be solid data there.
So to wrap up the performance levels on the PC, in multiplayer at 4K ultra settings, it's pretty good for 60 FPS. It's not locked, but only when heavy alpha effects and explosions and loads of characters are on screen does it tend to dip, and even then it stays around the 55s or the 50s at the worst case. So you could tweak a few settings, ultra's not required here, but it isn't running ultra settings, let me be clear. A lot of the settings are cut back in the multiplayer section, both on PC and console alike. So all the screen space reflections, the motion blur and other elements are all reduced significantly here to keep that performance levels high. You can see some of the elements improved in the PC version again, the shadows, the quality and the resolution, but overall it's a very similar looking game on all three versions outside the resolution, so you're not gaining much in multiplayer. And I must say, it's one of the better Gears of War titles I've played in the last couple of years online. I really got back into this, enjoying it. They've changed some elements. There's no longer powerful weapons dotted around the screen. You now press Y and buy the weapon when you earn kills and downs, so that makes the game more balanced because you don't get people rushing to the best spot to grab the sniper rifle and then really the long shot. You can't take them out if they're really good at it, and Gears of War is full of people that are very good at wall bouncing, shotgun, two-piecing, and obviously the long shot. So that does make the game better. And overall, the interaction, the King of the Hill game styles, and the speed of getting into the games after the first day, which I completely missed because I wasn't at home, is much, much better than the original Gears of War 4 I found. I found it very quick, very efficient, and I enjoyed my time online. It played very efficiently, very quickly, and actually took me a little bit back, more towards Gears of War 2 than Gears of War 4, and that isn't a bad thing. I'm looking forward to playing more of the game and diving into the full player game, single player and multiplayer, once release comes, but you can be sure that across PC and console alike you're in for a treat, and on Windows 10 machines it runs a beaut with bags of things to play around with to your heart's content. But there's no point in touching these in this menu section because there's not enough of a game here to test them with. Most likely many of them may not be fully working and implemented yet, or even to the level they expect for a final release. It is worth noting that yet again it's a great PC menu system, giving you a very clear idea of what the settings do, what they affect, and how much they affect both GPU, CPU and RAM. So you can play around with these and have some idea of the impact it's going to have on your system, which will help massively when you're trying to tweak it for that perfect setting once you get into the game. Anyway, as always, I hope you enjoyed this fast look at all 3 versions of Gears of War 5, and I hope you're looking forward to me covering it in the full release in the next few months. You guys and girls take care. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, share where appropriate, hit the thumbs up or the thumbs down whether you liked it or not, and be sure to leave your comments below. And I will catch you on the next one.
Wow, I'm very nearly impressed.